Welcome to the Loud Quiet. Ooh, empty nester. Okay. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think that actually probably is the theme of the empty nest. What are we doing? Let's do this. Let's do this thing. I don't know if I'm recording. Yeah, I am. Okay.
Great. Sans children. Just us. We need a tissue box up here. Follow along on our journey, and maybe, we can learn from others.
Yeah. I don't have a clue how to be empty nester.
This is the Loud Quiet, living the empty nest.
Welcome to the Loud Quiet. Another episode today. First, I want to start off by thanking our guests last week. Having Ward and Ashley on the episode was a lot of fun. And I thank you specifically, Ward and Ashley, for being patient with our technical glitches as we got through things. But it was great to have the episode come together. Learned a lot from them. Thank you to all the listeners out there. And I want to thank especially the new listeners. Those of you that joined because of Ward and Ashley have been incredibly encouraged by what I've seen from your comments, from the amazing amount of you that have chosen to listen to their episode. And I thank you for staying on this journey of the Loud Quiet as we continue to learn what it's like to be empty nesters as we continue on.
Yes. Episode 6. We made it past 5.
We've made it past more fingers than I have on one hand. That's got to be some level of accomplishment.
We'll see.
Can we get to toes?
I don't know. We'll see.
Every week it's a journey. Journey indeed, as we've certainly done our own share of journeying.
Mm-hmm. So this week I thought we could talk about expectations. We put that question out there and people liked it, but no one answered.
No one wants to talk about expectations.
I don't think, well, and when I was talking to Ashley, who I bounce things off of quite often, she said, I know what I was thinking, but I just didn't know how to say it or what to say or, and then when I started telling her the ones that I've been thinking, I was just like, well, yeah, those are all, and so there is a huge list of, I'm sure, what people thought empty nesting would be like.
Gosh. Yeah.
And, but today we thought we'd narrow it down to 3 that were top of mind for me, us.
Yeah.
And, then we can have multiple episodes of other ones as they come up or,
It's really I didn't know about that conversation with you and Ashley, and that is expectations is such a weird category because it's so unique. Even between the two of us, without conversation, without getting into discussions beforehand, and even now, there's a whole set of expectations that I might have had, that you might have had, that are either related to us, they're related to kids, they're related to life. Expectation is such a weird category that I can see why people might have been stymied, because heck, I can be stymied when I think about expectations.
Yeah. And, you have expectations when you have a child, tons and tons that are not met.
Lots of them. Then they get blown up within the first second. You probably had an expectation that people would be around in the delivery room after you gave birth.
And everyone left to go eat.
To go eat, to pay attention to Tanner and all of that. You're just left there.
Thanks.
We learned for baby number 2 to do a little better job on that one.
But so the first one that, I thought that we could talk about, because we just took a little mini vacay to San Antonio, and it was a great, great weekend. I'm trying to there we are on the Riverwalk. I really do. We love to go down there. It's just, I spent some time growing up there. So, I have been there millions of times, but it's just an easy getaway, less than an hour flight.
Right.
We didn't even rent a car because we knew we weren't going to be leaving the whole Riverwalk area. And now with Uber, it's easy anyways. But just, a fun, nice, quick little trip that, again, though, and here's where the expectation comes in. We had to go on the weekend.
I know.
Because empty nest does not equal retirement,
and that's
unfortunately.
And I've talked. I didn't realize it. I think it came conscious to me maybe a couple weeks ago. Somewhere it sort of manifested in my mind of I was feeling this sort of tension between well, actually expectations. Let's just call it for what it is. And I came to that realization that, wait, I thought that it was just going to be this freedom that anytime we wanted to do anything, we got to do it. And yeah, we talked a couple weeks ago about how, we got to go to Fort Worth and we got to do that because we didn't have this, or we got to go hang out at the PGA instead of a football game. So there are elements and degrees of freedom, but I had it in my head that the end of child raising inside your home ended up becoming the end of the career. And there was no plan for that. It's not, I'm 50. There's still, unfortunately, plenty of time left that I need to be putting in the work before retirement. But I really had this mental disconnect between what I thought our freedom would look like and what it ended up being.
And I think that's the point, is that we're still young. So, and we have 2 kids in out of state schools. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we can't, just not work and not have some income coming in from somewhere.
I keep trying to scratch off tickets, but there's 2 problems here. One is I just don't ever, I don't ever buy them, and then it never seems to work out either.
Just because you don't have your kids' activities,
yeah,
you still, you were back at work today. I was back at work today. But again, we did have the freedom to go down there this weekend because we weren't tied to a football game here. We weren't tied to other activities that, we would have every other weekend for the past
if you're just listening, you'll have to go over to
years.
YouTube and look at Clancy's facial expression there. She was like, "Oh my gosh, we've had activities that long. Is it really that long? Oh my gosh, it's been that long." And I think we'll need to get a guest on here that is actually in that retirement stage and talk about what was that transition like, that your empty nest, but your empty nest is a career. So some of the emptiness is filled by the job, and actually sometimes you're exhausted, right? And so it that job part of it is still there. And while I've felt that element of tension in the frustration that that's overstating it, but that we can't just go off and do anything, that on a Wednesday, if I say, hey, let's go to Belize, we can't just on a Wednesday go to Belize. There's also that other part of it that is, no, we still have the job and that's still filling that space. Mm-hmm. That definitely was an expectation from a career perspective. And I realize that we have 2 different types of jobs, but that's been true for you as well. That when you've thought about, hey, can we just bust out and do something, you have to keep that consideration in mind as well.
Yes. And, when the kids were still here, and I didn't really want to be gone much during the week, and that's when I was probably a little more serious about not taking off, because I felt like I was letting my classes down, or whereas now I'm like, yeah,
don't finish that thought. She's not saying she's eager to let her classes down.
No, but it doesn't weigh on my mind as much as it used to.
Yeah.
So, but even when we go to Arizona and, later, we're trying to figure out, I can take off, but you're still trying to figure out, okay, I need to find some office space to work from. And, now at least you do have a career that you can do that now, because before 5 years ago, we could not have done that, or even some of these clients that you've had, you weren't able to be as free as we can.
And that's as one thing. It's certainly approaching the empty nest phase, and it's now been 6 years since I became an independent consultant that started my own company. That has definitely given us, I talked about a glide slope last week, but it's given us that sort of the beginnings of that freedom. Mm-hmm. That because it's independent, because I do run my own business, yes, I have clients that have demands on me, and I choose to have those clients. There's a degree of flexibility that we did not have before. No. When you're having to go, okay, I got to take PTO and I got to get approval for that and all that sort of stuff. No, we just go, and there is no P in TO. It's just time off now.
And I think a lot of people are in that situation, post-COVID. A lot didn't go back to the office. So,
Right.
you know, I think there is a little more, you know, I think the pendulum is swinging back a little bit now.
As evidenced by the
But
traffic
yes,
on the
like,
tollway.
yeah, or take a picture of you in your office at home, or
That's a
you
whole,
know,
like, you could get me on a soapbox around don't treat people like they're in elementary school. Different topic, different time. But yeah, absolutely. It is true that pendulum is swinging back there. Mine's not the only sort of career expectation change that came about. You know, I've got to imagine that you had to go through a similar change and what you thought it might be like as you've exited the big piece of your career as mom. What's that been like? What's that expectation shift been like?
yeah, it is. You know, definitely, my role has definitely changed because I don't have other humans here that I'm having to care for.
There's the furry almost
little,
human at
yes,
your feet that
I
is not
know.
making the camera this time.
He would not leave my side today. So, but yeah, I'm, you know, I was already starting to go through some, okay, do I want to keep doing what I'm doing? Should I add something else because I'm, you know, part-time at what I do, which no, I really don't want to add anything else, but you know, it's just trying to, and I have I have some things that are in my creative brain.
Oh, I'm really excited. We're not going to talk about it, but I am
No.
so
So,
excited about
you
some of the
know,
ideas that are coming out.
We'll see where that goes, and
Boy, there's a tease. Let's mark this day.
so
But we're not telling you
but
what
you know,
it is.
it is different, but again, you know, Teagan calls me almost daily when she's walking back from the rec center, just because she likes to talk to someone as she's walking. It's not dangerous, it's not dark, but she just likes to talk to someone as she's walking back. And I, you know, and my friend Laura told me, shout out Laura, if anytime they want to talk to you, you say yes. It doesn't matter. You know, I missed her text when we were at dinner in San Antonio, which that was our time, but I would have stepped out and talked to her for the 6 minutes that it,
Right.
you know, took.
Right.
And she was fine. She said, "Oh, I'll just call someone else," you know, but her first call is to me,
Yeah.
which makes me feel good.
It absolutely,
So-
that I can see why that would. I'm curious. So, kind of try to go back in your mind before though. What was your expectation when you went into Empty Nest? Did you think that was going to be happening? Not
No.
hope, but expectation.
Not with her.
Okay.
No. And we both had that expectation. I
Right.
mean, I told her, you know, I expect a text daily.
And even if it's just I'm
yes,
alive, I
yeah,
think I remember
and
you
a
saying
phone
that.
call, you know, every once in a while. Well, no, it has been, and our expectation has been blown out of the water on that one, and for both of us. So,
Absolutely.
so yeah, so that, and it is, you know, I am still trying to figure out, you know, it's not like I've stopped cooking. I've stopped, you know, I'm still taking care of us.
Yeah.
So, but it is, my workload got cut way down. So
That
I'm not doing anyone's hair. Even though she could do her own hair, she would be tired and she'd want me to curl it for games. So,
So you're saying that you wouldn't do my hair
no.
today?
I'll do
Let's
yours.
see,
It didn't take
no,
long.
Not that much there. No, you've done a fantastic job of that, where you are still taking care of us in that regard. Shoot, we've even talked about that it's placemats for two, and yet that hasn't changed. And I don't know that I necessarily had expectations, because that's a dangerous ground for the non-cook in the family to have expectations. I don't and didn't. I know that I had wondered what that might be like. We thought about, what is that going to be like? How do you grocery shop for two? How do you cook for two? How do you do all that? And you've done a fantastic job of there. So I guess if you had to say there were expectations, it'd be something. This would be one of those positive results around. It's just, I have to be real, real careful. I didn't have expectations, because
No.
that's not fair. It's more just, it has been an absolute delight to see how you and we have evolved in that space.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say, I haven't had to, you know, because our children are not picky eaters at all, but there are certain things that they prefer over other things.
Right.
Now I don't even have to, I can cook whatever I want and it doesn't matter. So,
That's one thing
and,
you get out of me.
I mean,
aside from Brussels sprouts, I'll eat anything.
But it's not even like that. Like Teagan just doesn't like sloppy joes, so when we would have sloppy joes, which real fancy, she would just be not so excited. Now we can have sloppy joes if we want sloppy joes. So
are we having sloppy joes tonight?
no, we are not. Sorry. So that, roles, expectations, another one I think some people probably have is that, oh, now that the kids are gone, we can reconnect. My spouse and I can reconnect.
And
my partner and I can reconnect.
Yeah.
And yes, that it'll just happen.
Yeah.
When we were talking about these things, I kind of equated it to when you're younger and, first married, it's rocky. And then you're think, oh, if we have a baby, that'll fix everything. Well,
that works out well.
Yes, that's
doesn't
great.
Because babies do nothing but bring a couple together.
So
Jeez.
I do think that some couples, no matter what stage your marriage is in, I think people probably have that idea that we are just going to be together all the time. We're going to spend time together. It's going to be great. And, sometimes, we had an awesome time in San Antonio this weekend. When we got home yesterday afternoon, I went to our bedroom. You had football out on, and then we came back together for the Cowboys game. But everyone needs their alone separation time.
Absolutely. People need their togetherness, their alone time. That is something, what I think about that is, and what you're bringing up there about that expectation is that it would happen automatically.
Yes.
And that suddenly it's just a reverse, a return. It's not eight, I always get the math wrong, but not a return to 21 years ago when it was young married and then before that the dating. It's actually a return to some degree almost to when you started dating and you were reconnecting with that human without some of the awkwardness and some of that aspect of it. It takes work.
Yeah.
And yes, we have chosen to do a lot of that reconnection through activities. And for us specifically, travel to Fort Worth, travel to San Antonio. Well, as we run out of travel weekends or out of travel budget too, right? Well, it's going to continue to take that effort to redate and put that in. Let me say this differently. I bet you a year ago, I would have had the expectation that it was going to be, because we're together, because the kid involvement is no longer there, will automatically. I think as we got closer to it, and as our kids were less involved in our day-to-day lives, it became clear that expectation was a false expectation, and we needed to put in actual time as we had some tear-filled conversations around what's it going to look like when we go empty nest. I think those conversations helped us realize that expectation was a false one, and we needed to create a new one, which involved working at it.
Yeah. And I think, again, that's something that, you need to be working at even when your kids are here.
You couldn't just suddenly turn it on.
And it's not easy. We were blessed, again, to have parents who lived in town, who are willing to keep the kids. Not everyone has that. So, even when we didn't have that in Houston, we would still put Tanner to bed on Thursday night and make our pizza and watch Friends. That was our date night. It was in our house, but that was special to us.
It was special, and I love that.
And we can quote every line from Friends because we still watch them every night. So,
and you said make the pizza. That makes it sound like we were doing something
Oh,
gourmet.
no, I didn't.
Let's be honest.
Okay, I put the pizza in the oven.
It was DiGiorno
Yeah.
and Friends, and we have
put the pizza in the oven. Or sometimes if we got fancy, we ordered pizza. So.
Ooh, and what was the place I would pick up from? It was over there
Antonio's.
on
Antonio's
when we really wanted to splurge, we'd go pick up a pie.
But even, when you went back to saying it's like you have to go back, 27 years for us when we started dating. But even this weekend on the Riverwalk, we were throwing out jokes from things that happened 27 years ago. When we were on one of our first trips and this huge RV pulled out in front of us. and Rick tried to speed up so fast to get around the RV, RV, RV. And this weekend it was people on the Riverwalk, and it was RV, RV, RV. So, having those connections that you can pull from 27 years ago, that's special. And that's just something that, we got in a tiff, but tiny tiff, but you move on.
That almost made it more of a real weekend that we actually did get into. Well, that's not even worth trying to remember.
We're not even going to.
But it was.
I can know what it's about, but we're not going to rehash it. So
I remember it too. But it was just stupid. But I think that's what's good. Well, now one thing about that's a different level of maturity that probably comes not from the dating days, but from the nowadays is, all right, time out. What is this crap about? Knock it out and then move forward, right?
And it wasn't
apologize.
even,
no, it wasn't even anything serious.
But yes, I do agree with that. That as you mature in your relationship and age, the fights are not fights like they used to be when you were younger. So
now I also know that there's another category, like you talked about the relationship part of it, and that's very true. I think there's something that we've joked about too, but if you really go back into maybe my head, maybe your head, there's the whole category that people like to talk about in the empty nest, that suddenly it's going to be this just free-for-all sex, crazy.
Naked time all the time.
Naked all the time. The kids are gone, so the doors are open. Anytime somebody has a twinkle in their eye, that sort of stuff. Well, if that expectation were the case, that's not the reality, but I don't even, let's not necessarily talk about desire. That's just not how it is. It's not suddenly you pivot into some married couple version of the Playboy Mansion with each other. That's not suddenly this massive change.
Well, that's not going on here. So some people, maybe it is.
Well, that may fit their world, right?
Sure. And it's also, again, 27 years ago is a lot different than 27 years now.
There's
an age element to.
There's hormone differences, there are biology differences.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still in the joking category. We thought, at least now we don't have to worry about, timing or closing the door. Well, that stupid cat's around, so the door gets closed, right? So that even something as both capable of laughing about, but also truly serious to the relationship, expectations going into what that would look like in the empty nest are things that we have both experienced and have had to talk about. And that's probably a key theme here, is talk about your expectations.
Yeah. Because I agree. If your expectations in any of these categories or any other ones that anyone would like to share with us, if they're not getting met and you can't get on the same page, we know people that didn't make it after the empty, and so relationships can't survive if people aren't on the same page with the expectations, and you have to be able to talk openly about it.
I think that's what scared us a little bit, right? I'll say that. Well, none of our conversations are actually planned. We think about kind of topics, but I know that we didn't really talk about this. It scared us. I've referred to the tear-filled conversations, but there were things that we thought about. Not only were we sad for the kids to leave, not only were we kind of wondering what the change would look like, there was some fear, anxiety, worry. Well, how do we act as a couple? Because it's both weird to say the sentence, oh, well, it's like dating again. Well, no, it's not. I'm not 20. You're not in your 20s either, right? So it's not. We know each other. We have a shared history together. So it can't just be sitting at dinner and going, so where'd you grow up? Yeah. Which is great fodder for your first date, right?
Do we need to bring back out the question cube that we used to have with the kids?
That was with the kids,
little?
though.
Yeah. There's some good questions in there, though.
I mean, we should need to bring the cube out. But that difference between, it is dating and reconnecting, but it's reconnecting with already a shared history. So how do you do that? And the fear of what that looks like has to be talked through.
And that goes back to my statement of, you don't have to talk, it doesn't have to be conversation 24/7.
Right.
You don't have to be sitting next to each other on the couch holding hands, all the time when you're watching, We each have our spot. So, and we rotate them.
I'm
but we
going to
do have our
change
spot.
that. We are going to sit together for certain movies.
But, I think you don't have to fill the quiet with just chatter, because sometimes it's nice to just be in the quiet. I don't enjoy it all the time when I'm here by myself, but
That's something that is a difference between the dating and now, is that comfort with being silently together. And if you're sitting at dinner every single time, and if you are always silent and out of conversation, well, let's go get the cube out and have some. But it's actually okay to just sit there quietly. And that's something that I've probably come to appreciate a little bit slower than perhaps you may have. I know that I have a discomfort with the quiet. I'm getting better at that.
yeah. And you can, even out in the world, you can tell people that are uncomfortable with quiet, because they're always the ones that are trying to ask you a question or just start talking about
Sorry
something.
about that, everybody.
But again, we are both people that like to talk.
Right.
So there's not a lot of,
As evidenced by the two microphones in front of us and a record button.
there hasn't been a lot of just, and we can be honest. Like, I think even last night you were like, do we need to talk? And I was like, I have no more words. We've been together for 2 days,
And it's kind of
on
a
our
laugh
own.
now.
And it was fun,
Yeah.
but I can be just quiet and chill. We don't have to keep talking.
And that's not a code word. No, it really
No,
is an
yeah.
actual be quiet and
yeah.
chill. Yeah.
So, but yeah. So I think, again, those are just the ones that we kind of thought were top of mind for us. We'd love to hear if anybody has any other expectations, even from our empty nesters that have been empty nesters for many, many years. Let us know what you thought it was going to be, how it's been better, how things have not been exactly what you thought they were going to be.
Yeah, because we're sitting here talking in episode 6. How many weeks have we been empty nesters?
Yeah,
have we even been a month? I guess we've... Oh my gosh, it might be a month to the day today. Maybe plus or minus a bit. So we're acting like we know what we're talking. We have no idea what we're talking about. And so our expectations of what next month is going to be, our expectations of what 6 months and a year, all that, it's going to shift.
Sure.
So I'm curious what someone who's been at that empty nest game for a while.
And I don't think that we were giving anyone, this is what you need to do, because we don't know. We're still trying to figure it out.
We did give one piece of advice. Talk.
Oh, well, yes. Communicate and talk, yes. Mm-hmm.
And I would say laugh. I think that's one thing that's helped us a lot, is especially, let's use a tiff. It's amazing how when you have the tiff, it still feels a little odd until that first laugh.
Yeah.
And then once you and I have that first laugh, we're fine again.
Well, our relationship has always been built around, we love laughing. So, yeah, that's...
Including a button at a burger joint, but that'll be a different story from a different time. There's a lot of laughter.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's move on to our text of the week this week.
Okay, so that we'll call it text of the week this week.
Okay. If anyone has an idea of what we should call it.
That will get you on this show immediately if you can come up with a better brand for that.
Kids text. I don't know.
So what do we got
whatever.
this week?
So this week was from Teagan. And she sent this she sent it to both of us, yeah. And she just texted and said, I'm enjoying the new scam. And Rick replied, well, the first clue is the Postal Service never wishes you a good day. So, yeah.
Teagan had gotten I think it was a text scam, and she'd screenshotted it. And it was from the U.S. Postal Service, and she needed to send some link in or provide your personal information and have a good day. Yeah, well, that's never happened.
Yes. But bonus that our children do listen to us, because she said, I knew this was a scam. I knew not to send any of my info. And she said there was another. She was like, the second clue was that they sent it to me like 4 times in a row or something. So, yeah.
There's a lot of snark I could give to the post office. However,
and it had, her email as the hello. So, yes. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So it is nice.
So they do pay attention.
So there
are certain things.
Going back to closing out the episode on the word expectations, I had the expectations that our kids would discard all of the lessons that we'd ever provided to them and throw them all away, which clearly has not manifested. That
No.
It was nice to see that they did pay attention.
There are some expectations that I wish they would be doing a little bit more, but I'm not going to get into those because we're not talking about the kids. We're talking about us.
That's
so,
right.
But yes, so.
Well, I expected that this episode was going to be a lot of fun to record, and I will say that this has achieved my expectations. I hope that it's been fun to listen to.
Yep.
And
It's been fun to do. So, I mean, I love when our listeners enjoy it, but, like we said, we really set out to do this for us
were
to have
selfish.
something to do,
That's
but
right.
we're loving that people are really enjoying it. So,
yeah, that has been a lot of fun.
yeah,
Well,
so.
it has been quite a scene to record one more episode, helping to fill this space and just continue to build that relationship. So once again, it has been an enjoyable episode of The Loud Quiet, Living the Empty Nest.